You'll never believe what happened at my son's wedding day. I heard myself say, my voice steady. But inside, my heart was anything but. The wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. A chance to watch my only son, Luke, marry the woman of his dreams. But what happened that day changed everything. Beth, my daughter-in-law, stood up at the reception, holding her glass high for a toast. I could feel the eyes of the room on her as she smiled that cold, rehearsed smile. Here's to a new chapter, she said. Then, with a wicked grin, she added, let's auction off my sick mother-in-law to the highest bidder. The room froze. What could I say? I sat there, in front of all those people, while her words pierced through me like a knife. The laughter around me felt distant, like it was happening in another world. I could hear my son Luke's chuckle, trying to mask the tension in the air, but I could see it in his eyes. He didn't know what to do. Maybe he was too afraid to step in. Or maybe he didn't care. I don't know. What I do know is that everything I had built, everything I had given to this family, meant nothing to them. Not anymore. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell at her. I just sat there, my hands trembling in my lap. I looked at the faces of the guests, pretending to enjoy the party. But deep down, I was crumbling. The woman I once considered part of my family, the one who I had taken in as my own, had just humiliated me in front of everyone. As the night went on, I felt like an outsider. My son, Luke, didn't even look at me. He was too busy with Beth, too busy enjoying his perfect life. But not me. Not anymore. I realized something that night. This wasn't just a bad joke. This was the beginning of something much worse. They weren't just laughing at me. They were preparing to push me out of their lives for good. I spent the rest of the evening in silence, watching as the world around me continued without a care for what had just happened. And as I drove home that night, the weight of the words auction off echoed in my mind. I felt sick to my stomach, but also a quiet, steely resolve started to grow inside me. I wasn't going to be their victim. Not anymore. This was just the beginning of my fight. A fight for my dignity. A fight to reclaim my life. I sat in the car, the engine off, just staring at the empty street in front of me. The weight of Beth's words still hung in the air like a thick fog. I hadn't moved since I parked. My mind was racing, but my body felt like it was frozen in time. The night was quiet, eerily quiet. It should have been a night filled with joy and celebration, but instead, it felt like a funeral. Not just for my son's wedding, but for the family I had known, for the love and trust one had built over the years. All of it seemed so far away now. I could still hear her voice, that cold, calculating tone, as she made her cruel toast. Let's auction off my sick mother-in-law to the highest bidder. I could still see the faces of the guests, some laughing awkwardly, others unsure of how to react, but none of them stepped in. Not even Luke, my son. I felt the tears well up, but I didn't let them fall. Not in front of her, not in front of anyone. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, took a deep breath, and finally stepped out of the car. I was still shaking. When I got inside, the house felt cold. Empty. I turned the lights on and moved to the kitchen, but my hands were trembling so badly that I couldn't even hold a cup. The sound of the kettle boiling filled the silence, but it didn't comfort me. It only reminded me how empty it all was. I had spent so many years taking care of this family, raising Luke to be the man he was today, only to be treated like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. I had sacrificed so much. My husband had passed away years ago, and since then, I had worked to make sure that Luke never went without, that he had everything he needed. But now, it felt like all of that was worthless. I thought about Beth's cold words again. Auction off my sick mother-in-law. It was all too much. I closed my eyes, leaning against the counter, trying to steady myself. And then, as the silence pressed down on me, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them do this to me. I wasn't going to let Beth, or Luke, or anyone push me out of my own life. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to just sit back and let them take everything from me. I had spent years quietly sacrificing, silently giving up everything for this family. But now it was my turn. My turn to take control. My turn to fight for what was mine. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to stand up for myself. I had nothing left to lose. And so, I made my plan. It wouldn't be easy, but I would fight back. I would expose Beth for who she really was. And I would make Luke see what he was losing. No more silence. No more being the invisible one. I wasn't going to wait for them to decide my fate anymore. I was going to take control. The fight was just beginning. The days that followed were a blur of quiet resentment and careful planning. I moved through the motions of my life as though nothing had happened, as though Beth's cruel words hadn't shattered everything I knew about my family. But inside, I was changing. Each day, I found myself becoming more resolved, more certain of what I had to do. It wasn't just about the insult anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my life, and my place in this family. The silence was deafening in the house. Every room felt hollow, as though the walls themselves were aware of what had been said and done. I spent hours alone in the living room, staring at the photos of Luke growing up, remembering the days when he would come to me with scraped knees or a broken toy, asking for comfort. Those days felt like a lifetime ago now. When Luke finally called, it was a few days after the wedding, his voice strained, as though he didn't quite know how to approach me. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. His words hung in the air, thick with the weight of what had happened. I could hear the hesitation in his voice, but I didn't let it shake me. "What do you want to talk about, Luke?" I asked, my tone calm, almost detached. "About what happened at the wedding," he replied, his voice wavering. I could tell he was trying to find the right words, but it was clear he wasn't ready to face the truth. He was still trying to protect Beth, still too wrapped up in her manipulations to see what was happening right in front of him. "You need to apologize to Beth," he said, his words hitting me like a slap. "She didn't mean it the way it sounded. It was just a joke." A joke. Those words echoed in my mind as I tried to keep my voice steady. "A joke," I repeated, my lips tight. "You think what she said was just a joke?" "It was a misunderstanding, Mom. You know how she can be sometimes," he continued, avoiding my gaze, as though he couldn't bring himself to look me in the eye. I felt the sting of those words deep in my chest. How had it come to this? How had my son become so blinded by his wife's cruelty that he couldn't even see what she was doing to me? I had raised him better than this. I had given him everything, and now he was asking me to forgive someone who had just humiliated me in front of everyone. The sadness I felt was overwhelming, but I pushed it aside. I wouldn't let him see my pain. "Not this time. I don't need an apology, Luke," I said quietly, the words coming out more sharply than I intended. "What I need is for you to open your eyes, to see what's really going on here. Beth doesn't care about me. She never has." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, but he didn't say anything. I knew he didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to face the truth. But I wasn't going to sugarcoat it for him anymore. "You've let her tear this family apart, Luke," I continued. "And I won't stand by and watch it happen. Not anymore." I hung up the phone without waiting for him to respond. My hands were shaking, but I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had made my decision. I wasn't going to be the silent victim any longer. I was going to take back my life, and I was going to do it without their help. The next morning, I woke up early, as usual, and made my coffee in silence. But today, something was different. Today, I wasn't just going through the motions. Today, I was making a plan. I had already begun gathering the evidence I needed. I had copies of the financial records, the letters, the proof of Beth's manipulation. It wasn't much yet, but it was enough to start. I couldn't trust Luke to see what was happening, but I didn't need him to. I was going to expose the truth. It wasn't going to be easy, but I had never been afraid of hard work. As I sat there, sipping my coffee, I made a vow to myself. I was going to fight for what was mine. I was going to fight for my dignity, for my place in this family. And no matter what it took, I wasn't going to back down. The next few days were filled with a quiet determination. I spent my time gathering the pieces of my life, carefully sorting through old records, receipts, and even the small notes Beth had left around the house, the ones she thought were insignificant, but now felt like the clues to her entire game. Each document, each small detail, was another step closer to showing everyone the truth. I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was reclaiming my dignity, my power, and I was ready to confront the woman who had turned my world upside down. I knew that Luke would never believe me unless I showed him the facts, unless I laid it all bare for him to see. So, I made the decision to confront him. But this time, it wouldn't be just words. It would be undeniable. I wasn't going to beg or plead. I wasn't going to let him see me as the weak woman he'd come to expect. No, I was going to take control of this situation, the way I should have done all along. The day I chose to meet with Luke, I prepared myself. I put on my best dress, the one I hadn't worn in years, and styled my hair like I used to win. I still had the energy to care. I wanted him to see me for who I really was, not the frail, sickly woman he seemed to believe I had become. I wanted him to remember that I was his mother, that I had always been there for him. I didn't know how the conversation would go, but I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer afraid. When I arrived at his house, I was calm, but inside, I was seething. I knew I had to remain composed, but every part of me wanted to shout at him, to make him understand the depth of the betrayal. But I held it in, knowing that doing so would only make me look weak. I knocked on the door, and when Luke answered, he looked surprised to see me. His eyes flickered with guilt for a brief moment before he masked it with a forced smile. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, his voice cautious. "We need to talk," I replied, stepping inside. The room was quiet, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he avoided my gaze. It was as if he knew what was coming, but he wasn't ready to face it. I took a deep breath and placed the pile of papers on the table in front of him. "I've been going through some things, Luke," I said, my voice steady. "I've been collecting the truth, the facts, about what's been going on in this family, about what Beth has been doing behind my back." Luke's face went pale. "Mom, what are you talking about?" he asked, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew. He just didn't want to admit it. "I've seen the financial records," I said, looking directly at him. "I've seen the way Beth has been taking money from me, hiding it from you. I've seen the way she's been manipulating you, using you as a pawn in her game. And I won't stand for it anymore." He remained silent, but his expression shifted from confusion to something darker, something closer to realization. I could tell he was beginning to see the truth, but he was still in denial. "You don't understand," he said, his voice shaking. "Beth didn't mean to hurt you. She's just stressed. She's been dealing with a lot." I felt a pang of sorrow for him. He was still blinded by his love for her, still trying to protect her. But I knew better now. "No, Luke," I said, my voice calm but firm. "She doesn't care about you. She never did. She's been using you, and I won't let her destroy our family any longer." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with the weight of the truth. I watched as Luke processed what I had said, his face pale and drawn. I knew it wasn't easy for him to accept, but the truth was right in front of him, laid out in black and white. "You're right," he whispered, barely audible. The words were like a weight lifting from my chest, a small victory. But I knew this was just the beginning. This was only the first step in the fight to reclaim my life, my place in this family. I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The battle had just begun, and I would do whatever it took to win. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions, but I kept my focus sharp. Luke hadn't said much since that day I confronted him. The silence between us was deafening, but it wasn't unexpected. I knew it wasn't going to be easy for him to face the truth, especially about his wife. Beth had done a good job of weaving a web of lies, convincing him that everything she did was for the good of the family. But now, the truth was coming out, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. I could feel the shift in the air, in the way Luke started looking at me differently. He wasn't quite there yet, but I could see the cracks forming in his perception. He was beginning to see the person I had been, the mother he had once relied on, and not just the person Beth had molded me into. He hadn't reached the point where he was ready to fully confront her, but I could see the guilt in his eyes when he looked at me. It was subtle, but it was there. I knew the next step would be crucial. I needed to make sure that Luke knew exactly what kind of person his wife truly was. I wasn't going to do it through anger or accusations. No, I would show him the truth through her own actions, through the evidence I had gathered. I spent the next few days collecting more information. I found more financial discrepancies, more signs that Beth had been quietly manipulating everything. I kept everything organized, making sure it was clear and undeniable. Each document, each conversation, was a piece of the puzzle, and once it was all laid out, there would be no denying the truth. I decided to confront her directly. I wasn't going to let her continue to tear my family apart from the shadows. I called her one afternoon, my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. "Beth," I said, "we need to talk." There was a long pause before she responded, and I could hear the hesitation in her voice. "What is it, Margaret?" she asked, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "I know what you've been doing," I said, my words calm but firm, "and I'm done pretending like I don't see it." She tried to play it off, to laugh it off, but I could hear the tightness in her voice. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. but I wasn't going to let her lie her way out of this. Don't play dumb with me, I said. I've seen the bank statements, the records, and I know exactly what you've been doing. You've been taking money from me, using my illness as a cover to drain my accounts. And now, you've been trying to turn Luke against me. There was silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought she might hang up, but then she spoke, her voice lower, colder. You have no idea what you're talking about, she said, her tone icy. You don't understand what it's like to be in my position. I'm just trying to help Luke. He needs me. You're not helping him, I snapped back. You're using him. You've been using me, and now you've got him so wrapped up in your lies that he can't see the truth. I could hear her breath hitch on the other end of the line, and for the first time, I could sense a crack in her armor. But it wasn't enough. She quickly regained her composure, her voice dripping with false sweetness again. You're just upset because you don't understand what's happening, she said. I'm trying to help you, Margaret. I'm trying to make sure you're taken care of. But you're too stubborn to see it. No, I said, my voice hard. You're not helping me. You're taking advantage of me. And I'm not going to let you do it anymore. There was a pause, and then she laughed. It was a cold, bitter laugh that sent a chill down my spine. You think you can stop me? You've already lost, Margaret. Luke's on my side, and there's nothing you can do to change that. My heart sank, but I didn't let her see it. We'll see about that, I said, my voice steady. You may have Luke fooled for now, but I'm not done yet. You've underestimated me, Beth, and that's a mistake you'll regret. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. But this time, it wasn't fear or doubt that made me tremble. It was power. I had finally taken control. I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let her tear my family apart. And now, I had the evidence to prove it. It was time to take the next step. I wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. The days that followed were a constant battle between hope and fear. I had finally exposed the truth to Beth, but I knew that this was only the beginning. She wouldn't just let me walk away from this unscathed. I could feel it in my bones. She would fight back, and she would fight dirty. But I was ready. I had been preparing for this moment for far too long to back down now. Luke still hadn't fully come around. He was still wrapped up in Beth's lies, trying to convince himself that I was the one overreacting. But there was something different about him now. He didn't look at me the same way anymore. The guilt was there, even if he didn't know how to deal with it. I knew I had to be patient. I couldn't force him to see the truth all at once. But I also knew I couldn't wait forever. Beth was already making her next move, and I could feel her tightening the noose around me, trying to manipulate the situation even further. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I started to put my plan into motion. I had the evidence I needed, but I needed a few more pieces to complete the puzzle. I began reaching out to a few of the family members who had always been on the fringes, the ones who had seen the cracks in Beth's facade but hadn't spoken up. I needed them on my side. I couldn't fight this battle alone. Slowly, people started to listen. One by one, the family members who had been too afraid to speak out came to me, each one with their own story, their own version of what they had witnessed over the years. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the way Beth had systematically torn this family apart, piece by piece, all while hiding behind a mask of kindness. With every new piece of information, my resolve grew stronger. I wasn't just doing this for myself anymore. I was doing it for the family that had been destroyed by Beth's manipulations. And I was going to make sure that everyone knew the truth. The next step was crucial. I had to confront Luke one more time, but this time, I wasn't going to ask for his help. I wasn't going to beg him to believe me. This time, I was going to show him the truth. I called him, my voice calm but firm. Luke, it's time we had another talk, I said, knowing this would be the defining moment. He hesitated, but I could hear him on the other end, pacing. What is it now, Mom? His voice was tinged with frustration, but I wasn't deterred. I have something you need to see, I said. It's time to stop pretending. It's time for you to face what's been happening in this family. There was a long pause, and I could feel the tension building. What are you talking about? He finally asked, though I could hear the faintest trace of doubt in his voice. I didn't respond immediately. I didn't need to. I had already sent him the documents, the bank statements, the emails, the texts. Everything was there, plain as day. There would be no denying it. You'll see, I said quietly. You'll see everything. I'm done protecting her. I'm done pretending like she hasn't been playing you all along. I heard him let out a frustrated sigh. Mom, I don't know if I can deal with this right now, he said, his voice breaking slightly. This is a lot. Beth is my wife. I could hear the conflict in his voice, but I wasn't going to back down. I know she's your wife, I said. But that doesn't change what she's done. You're letting her destroy this family, Luke. You've been blinded by her lies, and you've let her use you. I'm asking you to look at the truth. I'm asking you to make a choice, because you can't keep living in this fantasy anymore. He was silent for a long time, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I need time, he said finally. I don't know what to believe. I understand, I said, my voice softening just a bit. But the truth is right in front of you. All I'm asking is for you to open your eyes. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling slightly. This was it. The moment of truth. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed. It was about my family. I wasn't going to let Beth win. Not now. Not ever. I had done everything I could to prepare for this, and now all I could do was wait. Wait for Luke to see the truth, and wait for him to make the choice that would change everything. It had been a week since I confronted Luke, and the silence between us had only grown. I could feel the tension hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. Every time I saw him, there was a sense of guilt in his eyes, but he wouldn't say anything. I knew he was struggling, torn between his loyalty to his wife and the truth he was starting to see. But I wasn't going to wait around forever. I couldn't. I had already waited too long for things to change. I was done being passive, done being the victim. I had lived my life for others, always putting them first, always making sacrifices, but not anymore. It was time to take control. The phone rang one afternoon, pulling me from my thoughts. I knew who it was before I even looked at the caller ID. Luke. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before answering. Mom. His voice cracked slightly, and I could tell he had been holding this in for a while. I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About everything. I didn't speak, letting the silence linger for a moment. I don't know how I didn't see it before, he continued. Beth has been lying to me, manipulating me. I don't know how I let it go on for so long. Hearing him admit it felt like a weight was lifting off my chest, but there was no time to rejoice. This wasn't over yet. I'm sorry, Mom, he said quietly. I should have listened to you. I've been a fool. I closed my eyes, allowing myself a moment of relief, but I wasn't done yet. I wasn't going to forgive him just yet. It's not about being a fool, Luke, I said, my voice steady but firm. It's about the fact that you let her manipulate you, let her tear this family apart. You let her turn me into the villain. And for what? For her to get what she wanted. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear him processing everything. I don't know what to do now, Mom, he admitted. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make things right with you. You can start by standing up to her, I said. You can start by telling her that you see her for what she is, and that you're not going to let her hurt this family anymore. That's how you start making things right. I could hear him sigh, the weight of everything settling on his shoulders. I'll do it, Mom. I'll talk to her. I'll fix this, I swear. I didn't believe him completely. Not yet, but it was a start. Good, I said, my voice softer now. But this isn't just about you and Beth. This is about me too. You've got a lot to make up for, Luke. I hung up the phone, my heart still heavy. It wasn't over. It wouldn't be until I knew that Beth had lost her grip on my son, on my family. I wasn't going to rest until I knew that Luke was free from her influence, and that our family could heal. I spent the next few days going over everything again, making sure I had all the evidence in order. I knew that I needed to be ready when Luke finally confronted Beth. I wasn't going to let her twist the truth, not again. I wasn't going to let her win. When the day finally came, I sat down at my kitchen table, staring at the pile of documents in front of me. My hands were steady, but inside, I was a storm of emotions. This was the moment of truth. This was when everything would change. I had done everything I could to prepare Luke, to show him the reality of what was happening. Now, it was up to him to take that final step. I wasn't going to do it for him. I had already done enough. This was his fight now. I just hoped he was ready for it. It had been 3 days since I had spoken to Luke, and I was starting to wonder if I had made a mistake by giving him space. I had hoped that his conversation with Beth would have sparked something in him, something to make him realize what was really happening. But instead, there had been nothing. No calls, no updates, just silence. It was a silence that gnawed at me, making me question if I had been too harsh, too quick to push him away. But deep down, I knew that what I was doing was right. Beth had manipulated him for far too long, and it was time to break the cycle. I knew that I couldn't just sit back and wait forever. I had already done everything I could to prepare him. Now, it was up to him to make the choice. The phone rang in the middle of the afternoon. I recognized the number instantly. It was Luke. My heart skipped a beat, but I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello," I said, my voice steady but cautious. "Mom, it's me." Luke's voice crackled on the other end. I did it. I talked to Beth." My stomach twisted with a mix of relief and fear. "And?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "She didn't take it well," he said, his voice quiet. "She's angry, Mom. Really angry. She's been lying to me for so long that I don't even know who she is anymore. I don't know how I let it go on for so long. But I did. I let her manipulate me." I felt a weight lift off my chest, but I didn't allow myself to relax just yet. "What did she say?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "She tried to deny everything, Mom. She tried to turn it around on me, said that I was the one being unreasonable. But I could see it in her eyes. I could see the truth. She was trying to protect herself. She didn't care about me, about us. She only cared about what she could get." "And what did you do?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "I told her I couldn't do this anymore," he said, his voice steady now, more certain. "I told her that I knew what she was doing, and I wasn't going to let her tear this family apart any longer. I told her that I wasn't going to choose her over you. Not anymore." I closed my eyes, a tear slipping down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of relief. He was finally seeing the truth. He was finally choosing me. "I'm proud of you, Luke," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It's not going to be easy, but you've made the right choice. You have to stay strong. Don't let her control you anymore." "I won't," he promised. "I'm going to fix this, Mom. I'm going to make things right." I sat back in my chair, the weight of everything that had happened in the past weeks finally beginning to sink in. This wasn't over yet. There was still so much to do, so many things that needed to be sorted out. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was hope. The family that I had worked so hard to build, that I had spent years nurturing, was still there. It was broken, yes, but it wasn't beyond repair. And with Luke finally standing by my side, I knew we could put it back together. I had spent so much time feeling alone, feeling abandoned by the very people I had given everything for. But now, I wasn't alone anymore. Luke had made his choice, and for the first time, I could see a way forward. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. But we had won a small victory, and that was enough for now. The days following Luke's confession felt like a strange kind of limbo. There was relief, yes, but also a deep, gnawing uncertainty. I had expected things to shift immediately, but reality wasn't so kind. The house was still silent, and while Luke had promised to make things right, the weight of the damage that had been done to our family still loomed over us. Beth didn't make it easy. Her facade of calm was beginning to crack, but she wasn't going down without a fight. She tried everything, playing the victim, twisting the truth, and attempting to turn Luke against me. But this time, Luke wasn't buying it. He had finally opened his eyes, and he wasn't going to let her manipulate him anymore. The confrontation with her had been a turning point, but I knew there was more work to be done. I couldn't relax just yet. It was a slow and painful process, but Luke and I were starting to rebuild our relationship. Every day, I saw small changes in him, little shifts in the way he spoke to me, in the way he looked at me. The guilt was still there, but he was starting to let go of it. I could feel the distance between us closing, and with each passing day, I began to feel less like the invisible woman I had been before. But Beth was still a threat. I could feel her presence in the background, lurking like a shadow, always watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. I knew that I couldn't let my guard down. She was still trying to control the narrative, trying to convince Luke that she was the one who had been wronged. I had heard her whispering to him during family dinners, trying to plant seeds of doubt in his mind, trying to convince him that I was the one causing the problems. I wasn't going to let that happen. I knew I had to act before she managed to worm her way back into his heart. One afternoon, as I sat at the kitchen table, I received an unexpected call from a family friend. She had always been a quiet observer, someone who stayed out of family drama, but now, her voice trembled with urgency. "Margaret," she said, "I've heard things. I don't know how to tell you this, but Beth is planning something. She's been talking about moving out of town, taking Luke with her. She's been telling people that you're the one causing all the trouble, that she needs to get away to protect her family." My heart sank. I had suspected something like this might be coming, but hearing it confirmed felt like a punch to the gut. I knew what this meant. Beth wasn't just trying to manipulate Luke anymore. She was trying to take him away from me. She wanted to isolate him, to keep him from seeing the truth. I could feel the familiar sting of betrayal, but this time, I wasn't going to let it stop me. I wasn't going to let her tear my family apart. I knew that I had to act fast. I couldn't wait for Luke to come to his senses on his own. I had to be the one to make him see the truth, to help him realize that he had been manipulated by the one person he trusted the most. I spent the next few days gathering every piece of evidence I could. I had the bank records, the messages, the emails, all the proof I needed to show Luke just how far Beth had gone. But it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the emotional manipulation, the way she had turned Luke against his own mother. I wasn't going to let her win. As I prepared for the final confrontation, I felt a strange calm wash over me. This was it. This was the moment when everything would change. I had given up so much for this family. I had sacrificed everything for Luke, and I wasn't going to let Beth take him from me. I called Luke that night, my hands shaking slightly as I dialed his number. I had been waiting for this moment for so long, and now it was here. The phone rang, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. When Luke finally answered, his voice was soft, hesitant. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked. I took a deep breath, holding back the emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. "And this time, it's not going to be easy." When Luke arrived at my house, his face was a mixture of determination and uncertainty. I could see that he had been wrestling with everything I had said, the weight of it all pressing down on him. He had made the choice to stand by me, but the battle was far from over. The tension in the room was palpable, and I knew this was the moment where everything would either fall apart or begin to heal. "Mom," he said, his voice low, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About Beth. About everything." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak just yet. The emotions were raw, too fresh, and I needed to stay composed. "I don't know how I let this happen," he continued, looking away as though the truth was too much for him to face directly. "I've been so blinded by everything she told me, all the lies. I've been believing her for so long, and now it feels like I'm waking up from some kind of fog." His words hit me harder than I expected. I knew it would be hard for him, but hearing him say it out loud made me realize how deep her manipulation had run. "You weren't the only one deceived," I said, my voice steady. "Beth has been playing everyone, especially you. She's been using you, manipulating you, all for her own gain. I've been trying to warn you for months, Luke, but you wouldn't see it. And now, look where we are." He looked at me then, his eyes filled with regret and something deeper, something I couldn't quite name. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said quietly. I wanted to believe in her. She made me feel like I was the one who was wrong, the one who was causing all the problems." I sighed, feeling a mix of anger and sadness flood through me. I wanted to be angry at him, at his blindness, but the truth was, I was more hurt than anything. He had been so caught up in the lies that he couldn't see what was right in front of him. "I know," I said softly, my voice breaking just a little. "But you have to understand, Luke. I've spent my whole life giving everything to this family, to you, and she's taken that and turned it into something ugly. She's not just hurting me, she's been hurting all of us, and it's time to stop it. I need you to understand that this isn't just about her and me anymore. It's about us, your family, our family." He swallowed hard, and for the first time, I saw a real shift in him, a realization that maybe, just maybe, the truth was something he had been avoiding for far too long. "What do I do now, Mom?" he asked, his voice strained, as though he didn't know how to begin making things right. "You're going to stand up to her," I said firmly. "You're going to show her that you see the truth now, that you won't let her manipulate you or tear us apart anymore. And you're going to help me make sure she can't do this to anyone else." He nodded slowly, as though processing everything I was saying, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of determination in his eyes. It wasn't just guilt anymore, it was resolve. "I will, Mom," he said, his voice more sure than before. "I'll talk to her. I'll do whatever it takes." I studied his face, looking for any sign of doubt, but all I saw was a man who had finally begun to see the truth, a son who had realized the mistakes he had made and was ready to fight for what was right. I could feel the shift in him, the change I had been hoping for. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight. But this was the beginning of something new. It was the beginning of us finally healing. I wasn't sure how the next few weeks would play out, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let Beth tear my family apart any longer. I had fought too long and too hard for this family to give up now. And with Luke finally standing by me, we would face whatever came next together. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope again. It had been days since Luke had promised to take action, and I could see that things were slowly changing. It was a relief to see him take his first steps toward making things right, but there was still a nagging doubt in my mind. I knew that Beth wouldn't let go so easily. She was calculating, and I could feel the tension between Luke and me as the days went by. I kept telling myself that this was the beginning of something better, but every time I saw Luke look at me with that same hesitation, that same uncertainty, I felt a surge of fear in my chest. I wasn't sure what Beth was doing behind closed doors, but I knew she wasn't done yet. She wouldn't let go of the control she had over Luke without a fight. Luke had made progress, but I wasn't convinced it would be enough. I needed to make sure that this wasn't just a fleeting moment of clarity for him. He needed to understand the gravity of what was at stake. It wasn't just about him and Beth anymore. It was about our family, the family I had given everything to. As much as it hurt to admit it, the only way forward was for Luke to choose. He had to choose me. He had to choose us. One evening, as I was sitting at the kitchen table, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I knew immediately who it was. Luke. I stood up, my heart racing. He had asked to talk, and I knew this conversation would be pivotal. It would either strengthen the fragile bond we had left, or it would destroy it completely. When Luke walked through the door, I could see the weight on his shoulders, the exhaustion in his eyes. But there was something different about him. Something that wasn't there before. "Mom," he said, his voice softer than I expected. "I've been thinking a lot. About everything. About what you said. About what I've done." His words hit me harder than I expected. I could feel the guilt radiating off him. But there was something else there, something I hadn't seen in him in years. "What's going on, Luke?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, not letting my emotions take over. "I told her," he said, his voice quiet, almost like he was ashamed to speak the words aloud. "I told Beth that I couldn't do this anymore. I told her I couldn't keep living the way we were. She didn't take it well, Mom. She was furious. But I don't care anymore. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine. I've been blind to it for so long, but now I see what she's done. I see what she's been doing to me, to you, to this whole family." I felt a lump form in my throat, but I swallowed it down, refusing to let him see the tears that threatened to fall. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when Luke would finally realize the truth, when he would finally see the manipulative woman for who she really was. "I'm proud of you, Luke," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I know it wasn't easy, but you did the right thing." He looked at me then, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and determination. "I don't know what's next, Mom. I don't know how to fix this, but I'm going to try. I'm going to make things right." I placed a hand on his shoulder, a small but meaningful gesture of reassurance. "You don't have to fix everything, Luke," I said softly. "You just need to keep doing what's right. That's all any of us can do." The weight that had been holding me down for so long seemed to lift in that moment, replaced by a glimmer of hope. Luke was finally starting to see the truth. And with that, I knew that things could get better. It wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead would be long and difficult. Beth wouldn't go down without a fight, and there would be moments of doubt and fear. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, our family could heal. I wasn't alone anymore. Luke was standing with me, and together, we would face whatever came next. The battle wasn't over, but it had just shifted in our favor. The days that followed Luke's decision felt like a strange mixture of calm and unease. Beth hadn't made any immediate moves, but I knew that she was far from done. She was a master of manipulation, and it wouldn't be long before she tried to pull Luke back into her web. But something had changed in him. He wasn't the same man he had been just a few weeks ago. The fog had lifted from his eyes, and though it was still painful to confront, he was finally ready to see what I had been trying to show him all along. I watched him over the next few days, and there was a quiet strength in him that I hadn't seen before. He was no longer afraid to speak his mind, to stand up for what was right, and most importantly, to stand up for me. He had become the son I had always hoped he would be. But I knew the real test was coming. The confrontation with Beth. She wouldn't let him go without a fight, and I couldn't be sure that he was ready to face her on his own. He still loved her, in some twisted way. But now he had to choose. And he was finally ready to choose me. I could feel the tension building, not just in the house, but in me. The weight of everything I had been through, the years of manipulation and hurt, felt like a heavy burden. But for the first time, I didn't feel alone in carrying it. Luke was there, standing by me, and that made all the difference. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, Luke came to me with a look on his face that I couldn't quite place. He had been quiet all day, his mind obviously preoccupied, and I knew the moment had come. "Mom, I'm going to talk to her," he said, his voice low but firm. "I'm going to tell her everything. I'm going to tell her I can't live this way anymore." My heart swelled with pride, but I also felt a tight knot of anxiety form in my chest. This wasn't going to be easy. Beth wasn't going to just give up, but I knew that Luke had to do this for himself. "I'm proud of you, Luke," I said softly, reaching out to touch his arm. "I know it won't be easy, but you're doing the right thing. You're taking control of your own life, and you're standing up for what matters." He nodded, his expression serious. "I don't know what will happen after this," he said, his voice trembling just a little. "But I can't keep living like this. I can't keep letting her control me. I've lost myself, Mom, and I don't want to lose you too." His words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just about him and Beth anymore. It was about the life we had shared, the bond we had once had, and the pain that had been caused by one person's selfishness. I knew that things would never be the same, but I also knew that this was the first step toward healing. "You haven't lost me, Luke," I said softly. "We're going to get through this together." Later that evening, I watched as Luke left to meet with Beth. I knew the conversation would be difficult, but I also knew that it was necessary. It was the only way forward. The house was quiet without him, and I found myself pacing the living room, waiting for some sign, some indication that things would finally start to change. It felt like hours, but in reality, it was only a few minutes before the door opened again. Luke stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, he walked over to me, his eyes heavy with emotion. "It's done," he said quietly. "She's gone. I told her everything. I told her I couldn't live with the lies anymore. She tried to fight it, tried to twist things around, but I didn't let her. I won't let her control me anymore." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but there was still a part of me that knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. "You did the right thing, Luke," I said, my voice breaking with emotion. "You stood up for yourself, and you stood up for this family." He smiled faintly, but there was a sadness in his eyes. "It's not over," he said quietly. "There's still a lot to fix. But this is a start, and that's enough for now." I nodded, knowing he was right. This wasn't the end, but it was a new beginning. A beginning where we could rebuild, where we could heal, and where Beth's hold on our family was finally broken. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was still uncertain, but as long as we were together, I knew we could face whatever came next. In this powerful tale of family struggles, a mother grapples with betrayal from her daughter-in-law and son, leading her to reclaim her life. The emotional journey of the mother, who once felt invisible and sidelined, is a deeply moving exploration of love, manipulation, and the fight for personal dignity. As the story unfolds, family stories of hidden lies and control emerge, showing how the mother fights back to reconnect with her son and stand up to the person who has caused so much pain. The tension in these family stories intensifies as the son finally realizes the truth about his wife and begins to make amends. As the family stories evolve, the mother's determination becomes a source of hope, pushing her to face the emotional challenges ahead and take back control of her life. With every twist and turn, these family stories captivate, showing the complexity of relationships and the power of standing up for what's right. These family stories are not just about conflict. They're about overcoming adversity, healing, and finding redemption in the most unexpected places. The emotional depth of these family stories brings a fresh perspective on the bonds that hold us together and the strength it takes to fight for the family we deserve.